Dear Mr. President, throughout this letter of address, I would like to thoroughly inform you on the ongoing demonstrations taking place in Ethiopia and the reasons why I believe your administration should take a firm stance in making this issue a matter of your foreign policy. I would like to first start by giving an insight into the background and purpose of these weekly demonstrations. In July 2011, Ethiopian government leaders had insisted that the Ethiopian Islamic Affairs Supreme Council accept members from a sect imported from Lebanon, known as Al-Ahbash, and the upcoming reshuffling of the council. This sect, having been called for its conformism to the government's discretion and for its rejection of many fundamental mainstream Islamic teachings, has been the puppet force the government uses to meddle in Islamic religious affairs. Not only were the new religious leaders appointed by the government, but 5 of 11 of them were active government officials before appointment to the Islamic Affairs Supreme Council. It is worth noting that the government adopted this forceful method of appointing religious leaders with the country's dominant Tewahedo Orthodox Church as well as at the beginning of the regime's power. The Ethiopian Constitution of 1995 clearly states the separation of religion and state in Chapter 12, Article 11, Clause 3. The state shall not interfere in religious affairs, neither shall religion interfere in the affairs of the state. Despite its constitutional presence, the Ethiopian government continues to deny the rights of Ethiopia's Muslims to elect their own council members, thereby blocking an accurate voice to represent the over 30 million strong community. The Ethiopian government's consideration of a threat of homegrown terrorism has been long apparent, but only recently could they find an excuse to enact legislation and employ force on the Muslim population in the name of national security. As a response to protect its borders from impending terror, the government signed into law the deeply flawed 2009 Anti-Terrorism Proclamation. Since then, it has used the law as a basis in the courts to criminalize any acts it perceives should be labeled as terrorist or inspiring terror. 29 Muslim protest leaders are among those who went on trial on April 2nd, due to the implications this law creates. Because the vague anti-terrorism law has such broad provisions, it fails to state exactly what should be characterized as terrorist acts, and therefore the government uses it at its own will to jail innocent people who exercise their internationally recognized right to freedom of speech, peaceful assembly, and association. Because of the government's shortcomings, our innocent brothers are suffering at the hands of these oppressors. Not to mention they had suffered immensely during pretrial detention. In fact, according to the Human Rights Watch report from April 2nd, some defendants have alleged ill treatment as well as limited access to any legal counsel. To discuss matters on how they will be tried and simply why their actions that seem to follow within the lines of the law are being considered by the court as unlawful. Imprisoning people simply for exercising their constitutional right of assembling a peaceful demonstration can never be proven justifiable, and therefore hint a politically motivated prosecution. The government's political motivation was shown once again after last month's highly publicized rally, when Ethiopian State Minister of Communication Yasgebaw said in a statement on ETV that it was unconstitutional to call for release of persons convicted of criminal offenses, which 1, completely ignores the principle of free speech, and 2, is not his right to determine before prior conviction by the court, nor can he hold the organizers responsible. To make matters worse, the government made its display of abhorrence toward the Ethiopian Muslims movement more blatant when state-run ETV aired a shocking program this February called Jihad We Harakat, or Jihad War, where the jailed leaders of the struggle were interrogated in scenes that demonized them as terrorists, though the trial was yet to come, and therefore stripped them of the presumption of their innocence, which would soon lead to an unfair trial. Through this broadcast, the government hoped to convince the public that the protest leaders were collaborating in a terrorist plot. Through its response of abusing power and blocking the voices of the accused in the attack, the Ethiopian government has shown that its sole concerns are based on political motives rather than the content of the people. Clearly shown by its manipulation of the law and corrupt use of propaganda, the government manifests a desire to intimidate and separate the Ethiopian population based on religious lines. This is just a partial list of seemingly endless grievances the Ethiopian people have against its tyrannical government. The one thing that unites them all, regardless of religious differences, is their mutual desire for a change and the way the government approaches its own people, for its persistence in denying them the very thing that was promised to them at the government's establishment must stop. The Ethiopian Muslims' demands are simple and attainable with the support of high authorities. These are for them to be given back the freedom to manage their own religious affairs, the release of their leaders, and the recognition by their own government that it has a duty toward its people to protect their unalienable rights. I certainly hope there will be action taken by the international community to stand by this purposeful cause. May justice prevail for the Muslims of Ethiopia. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum.
Takbir! By the way,